Excellent. Hello, I'm Richard Esplin, and I'm joined today by Doug Dennerline, CEO of Alfresco for Community Office Hours, or I guess Office Hours that for the community. We've got the IRC channel open. We have a bunch of people anxiously awaiting our conversation, I guess, Doug. Glad to have you join us. Thank you for accepting.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
So I wanted to give some announcements as per our custom. Rory Weatherall got out the most recent release of Records Management 2.3, and the most important part of this release is it works with Community Edition 5.0, so it's the first Records Management that works on 5.0. It's got cool new features as well, but if you've been waiting for Records Management on the latest Community Edition release, it's available. So you can find that in the wiki or at the download page on alfresco.com/product/community. We've done a couple important blog posts that I thought you should be aware of. First is that the most important is on alfresco.com, blogs.alfresco.com. John Newton has published a blog on Alfresco's open source strategy called, commitment to a strong open source product. And in there, we worked very collaboratively as a team to define, how does open source fit into our business and what can you expect when you're using our open source product. And it's all laid out there. I know there have been a lot of questions on the topic, as we saw in the questions submitted for today, and so I hope you find that useful. I also published a blog post to answer questions about my role at Alfresco. Things have been really busy since I became head of community a couple months ago, and I want to just put it in writing. This is what I'm doing. A couple dates. 4th of September is a meetup in Seville, Spain. I know Mars Bard's excited to go, he was saying. And, of course, that group's always really active, meets really regularly. And can't neglect discussing Alfresco Summit. So it is the 23rd through 25th of September in San Francisco. And it starts on the 7th of October in London. The most important part of Summit, I think, for us getting together as a community is the hackathon, which is always lots of fun. Nathan McMinn has put it together so that he set up a wiki page so you can sign up for your project or your team. We'll also be having a table together on lunch on the third day, the second day of sessions. Now, if you're thinking about coming to the hackathon, you should be aware that the hackathon's for people to understand how to develop with Alfresco. To get you up to speed, there's some really important training classes. So the first day of Summit is our training day, and it does coincide with the hackathon. And there's some really valuable sessions that I want to make sure you're aware of. The first is developing using Maven with Alfresco. So if you came to Tech Talk Live 2 weeks ago and you enjoyed the discussion with Gab and Ol and thought this is the coolest stuff, these tools, how do I get using it, and you needed more than an hour, this is your session. Maurizio will be presenting. He's one of the core people that helped build the SDK and set up the Maven tools. He's the right person to learn from. It'll be really valuable. If you're new to developing on Alfresco, Rich McKnight, our senior consultant, principal consultant, top guy in the company as far as that goes, is going to be presenting on content modeling. Again, he's the right person to learn that from. It'll be a treat to learn from him. And the third one I want to make sure you knew about was, well, it's 2 sessions. It's developing web scripts with JavaScript or with Java. So 2 separate sessions. One's taught by Rui, one's taught by Lehman, and they're both, those guys know what they're doing. It'll be a great opportunity to improve your skills customizing Alfresco. And, of course, we'll have a session. Daryl will be presenting on share customizations, so more from an admin perspective. All those sessions, I think, will be really valuable training. I highly recommend you check them out. And if you feel really comfortable with that stuff, then come to the hackathon and put those skills to work. Of course, the next hangout we'll probably be doing, because we have Summit in both September and October, I'm going to focus on that for the next 2 months. So the next hangout we'll be doing is in November with Tech Talk Live. So that is the news. Ol says that he's expecting a beta release of the SDK 2.0 this weekend, and they're looking, last I heard, they're looking to get it all ready for Summit. So thanks for the update, Ol. Excellent. So that's the announcements. Quite a list this time. That's what happens when I skip community office hours in July. So thanks for the patience. So what's the topic of today? So during the last office hours, or maybe it was an IRC discussion, I don't even remember, you guys said, we want to hear more from Alfresco leadership. We want to get to know Alfresco leadership. So I told that to Doug, and he said, well, introduce me. And here we are. So we expect this to be the first of many conversations. I put out a request for questions. I got about 20, and they're good questions, and we have answers to a lot of them. Some of them we're still working on our plan, but it's the first of many conversations, so that's okay. I do expect, we talked about inviting some of the community members to the chat, to the panel, to ask the questions live. But given how many questions we got, we thought it'd be nice, cleaner to just go through the questions more efficient. And that way, hopefully, we'll still have 10 minutes at the end to take questions from the IRC channel. So we do want to cover the questions we were given. We do hope to invite some of you to the panel in future conversations. But that's how come we took this format today. So let's take a minute and get to know Doug a bit more. So Doug, I know that this is a lot of our community members. You did get a talk at Summit last fall. That was when most of the community got to meet you, but this is a bit less formal. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself and what do you do when you're not running a company?
Okay, great. Well, thanks for having me for one. We're in the middle of moving offices in the Bay Area, so I'm in my home. So if you see a cat or two jumping around the office, sorry about that, but we have 3 cats running around here, and I spend a lot of time in this office. So a little bit about me. I've been, in the industry, the technical industry, for a long time, about 33 years now. I tell people it's funny, I fell into the software business. I was really a networking guy for the first 25 years of my career. I was an early guy at 3Com Corporation, employee 300 there. Spent 11 years with 3Com. And then I spent 11 years with Cisco Systems. But my last role at Cisco was, I guess I had a little bit to do with why Cisco acquired WebEx, and post the acquisition of WebEx, John Chambers asked me to go over and be CEO of WebEx internally. So got me out of the networking side and into the software side. And from there I did a bit of a stint with Salesforce and then SuccessFactors, both SaaS companies. And from there I ended up here at Alfresco. So, married, 4 kids. People have a 2-generation family. I've been married a couple times. So I have a 26-year-old daughter and a 25-year-old daughter that just got married, and then I have a 10 and a 12-year-old daughter and son. So what do I do when I'm not working? I'm probably spending time with all of my kids and my family. And if I have any hobbies at this point in my life, I try to get a few days of running in when I'm not working. So a little bit about me. So Richard, I can hear you. I don't know what happened.
Sorry, I went on mute to cough. Apologize. So when you're not at work, you're planning a wedding the last 6 months or something. It's a lot of work. And I did invite. I know a number of the community people have offered to go running with me at Summit. I did invite Doug, but he's in crazy meetings in the morning. Matter of fact, I know it's early in Pacific time for you, but how early do you normally start meetings every day running a global company?
Well, because we're UK based, and they're 8 hours ahead. I usually start my day at between 6:30 and 7 meetings via Skype with the guys in the UK.
It's an early morning, so yeah. Thanks for making the time in your meeting schedule to hang out with us.
Plus, I like to run at the end of the day. I like to run the day off versus like you start early every day. So.
Yeah. So I'm only that diligent when I'm traveling. When I'm at home, I run in the evenings or not at all.
Okay.
So excellent. So thanks for the introduction. I found that really useful. So let's talk a little bit about the questions. We got questions that fall into 4 buckets. Some of the questions were about getting to know you, and we discussed some of those. Some of the questions were on Doug's thoughts on the role of the community in Alfresco's business. Some thoughts were on Alfresco's efforts to invest in the community, and some questions were about open source. So if the people in the channel have questions that are in other buckets, that'd be really interesting, because that's where we'll spend most of the time on those 4 topics. But it's interesting when we were going through the questions that we do this internally at Alfresco too. We use the word community to mean a lot of things. And I just want to be really clear with everybody that the community, I look at it as three separate activities that I'm involved in. One is growing the ecosystem around Alfresco, the community of employees and customers and partners and community edition users and developers and students and hobbyists and retired people that still like to hang out with us. That's the larger community. Within that, there's a developer community, and Alfresco being a platform, a developer tool, that's a really important group of the community. Most of the people that hang out on the channel with us are part of that developer group. And the developer evangelism is an important topic apart from the larger ecosystem, and we will discuss that some today. And then the third, of course, is the open source community that's focused on Alfresco Community Edition. So whenever we're referring to the product Community Edition, I try to be really diligent and use the word edition, so you remember it's the product we're talking about, not necessarily the people or the ecosystem. And that open source product is really important in our strategy. Is that the blog post we put out this week says it's how we introduce people to our product. It's how we get developers engaged. It's how we get testing and improve our engineering. It serves a lot of purposes, but it's one part of that larger question. So hopefully that helps set the stage for our conversation today, Doug. So on that topic, so the first round of questions was related to what you see as that ecosystem, as the community at Alfresco. And I'm also interested in how you think developers play in that larger ecosystem of Alfresco.
Richard, I don't know that if it feels like it changed, it hasn't been purposeful. At least since I got here. The company's been around. It hasn't changed I don't think its attitude around community forever. As the platform code base has gotten much larger, it's been harder to take contributions, I think, like we did in the early days. But I don't think it's much different than what we expect from it before to help us make quality software, to develop tools around that are needed around the platform by people. Some of the admin tools, the contributions that the community's made have been tremendous. And so to me, it really hasn't changed. I think with Just Departure, we're in the middle of a transition in terms of what's the conversation and the effort around what we do with the community. But what we do with Community Edition, I don't know that the strategy's changed very much.
Yes, IRC channel saying I'm talking too much, but that's okay. I won't talk as much now. We're going to hear more from Doug. But I agree, Doug, that 3 years ago I was talking with one of the engineers about how do we engage better with David Caruana, our chief architect, and he's one of the founding engineers. He said when there were just 5 people in a room, it was easy to collaborate with the larger world. But now that there's 50 people in that room, it's a lot easier to just talk to coworkers. And I think that's part of growing, and we have to consciously work against that tendency.
Yeah, exactly.
So what did you know about open source before you joined Alfresco, and what have you learned since joining Alfresco?
Admittingly, I had never really interacted with open source other than when I was with WebEx. We were doing some acquisitions around some of the capabilities that we wanted to add to it, and when we looked at acquisitions, we wanted to see where the code base was from. And this is probably early days, so people were really worried about some of the early GPL stuff, but very little, if any. I've tried to since educate myself, of course. I've met with the CEO, Jim Whitehurst, at Red Hat. I spent some time with him. I met with Mike Olson at Cloudera. I've got to know Larry Augustine at Sugar CRM, and I've had lots of conversations about how they view their open source products and how they interact with the community. I guess if I could describe where I'm falling in those conversations, I think they're the forking of the code on the Red Hat side. Seems to me to be expensive for a company to do, and then you have 2 really separate products. Larry went the other direction and decided to not open source, and then Olson's kind of where my head is. He made some comments to me that I found very interesting. He said, Doug, I've built 4 open source companies. He said, when you do the pure open source play, Red Hat's been successful on a services-only strategy, but most other open source companies get to about 25 or 30 million dollars in size, and then recognize that some of the partners that they've engaged now can sell their services cheaper than the company can, and then the company struggles to get larger. So he said, what I've done is, and I kind of way I think about it is the open source platform of, of our capability. We will continue and always open source, but then we'll build capabilities on top of that we can monetize, that are more enterprise focused capabilities that we wouldn't open source, that we monetize. And so I think that's kind of the strategy in my mind as we move forward.
Yeah, the Ole says it's great to hear that you've taken the opportunity to meet a lot of these other open source leaders. And I have to say, I'm jealous. I would love to sit in a room with some of those guys. And,
I really enjoyed it.
It's very fascinating, and I think we've always been now the industry uses the term open core. We've always had the core community edition product, and we've always had a handful of additional differentiation items. So it's interesting to know that that'll probably widen a bit, but we do. That's why we put that blog post together. We do want to keep that core product really useful and cutting edge content management systems. So.
Correct.
How do you think members of the community can be a driving force to organize and promote Alfresco and Community Edition and the community, the ecosystem around Alfresco?
Well, I think that's where I probably need some education from our own community in terms of, I think they've been self-forming and helping us in a lot of ways. The order of the bee kind of stuff I love, to help self-form these committees that can help us determine what it is that we want to do and use their capabilities better. It has created a conversation, just so everybody knows, internally, where we really are trying to figure out how we can better interact than we have been interacting with the community in the last few years. How do we get the engineers more involved in participating and interacting with the community? I think we've created a culture internally, not necessarily because of me, I think it was already here, where people have been pushing so hard on getting product out that they haven't spent much time interacting with the community. And so we're trying to find a balance here where we can open it up a little bit more so people can interact with the community in a more active participation than we have in the past. You're on mute. You're on mute, Richard.
Oh, sorry about that. People are asking questions, so I've been writing them down, so don't forget them.
Okay.
Gab says that the SDK is one example of that, where sometimes we don't get as much done as we'd like to, and we're really grateful that the community steps in and helps with that.
Yeah, exactly.
And that order to be is that internal conversation we've had, I think, is really valuable. How do we engage? How do we help the community self-govern? One of the questions that came up was about meetups. We do have local meetups that happen around the world. It'd be nice to have even more. Sometimes these meetups request things like, having me or another member of the team go out and visit. We do that less than we used to. People are curious about what's the point of that strategy, and how do we as Alfresco best support our local communities?
Again, I'm open to this, to determining what our participation will be. We're trying to be frugal, from an expense standpoint. Poor Jeff was flying all over the world to participate in these. It's a quality of life issue, I think, in some cases, Richard. You got a bunch of kids, you want to be home. But I'm open to having, some determination of a list of where they are, and then to see how we can participate. Maybe instead of Jeff or you flying around the world, maybe if it's in Europe, we get somebody locally on the engineering team to participate. So, we just got to get better coordinated in that regard.
Yeah, and it is interesting to look at the, as a company, we go through these stages of emphasis on, growing our business operations, which you've been trying to really formalize the last little while. And I expect at some point we'll we'll have more of a, one of the items that was suggested on the Alfresco blog was having a team of developer evangelists that are able to go support these different events. And I would expect at some point that'll make sense. But at the current stage of our company, it seems like we're trying to be really focused on building infrastructure, doing more things online, building things that can scale, and I think there's a lot of value to that.
Well, and from my past experience, I think if you get people that do nothing but participate, in the stand-ups or the meetups, they're probably not going to be close enough to what's really happening in engineering to provide any real guidance. I think we got to find a way and I think it's important for our own developers to participate in these. I think they'll learn something that will help us build a better product.
Agreed. And so that segues to the next round of topics, which is the community team and how we're organized and how we plan to work in the future. So, the community team used to be 2 people. For now, it's 1. The question is, what's the future of the community team?
Well, we took the opportunity with Jeff's departure to really kind of take a deep dive, and Richard did a whole bunch of good work in terms of really helping educate all of us on what the community is today. What is the needs of the community, and so we've created a good conversation internally around how do we meet that need. So, we are focused, just to be completely transparent right now, I've kind of not let anybody hire anywhere in the company other than in the field. One of the metrics that I think is one that I've focused on my entire career is you want 20% of your population in a company to be quota carrying, because they drive, sales drives if you drive the top line, that creates enough revenue to help bring more people into the company and the other functions. We were woefully underinvested in sales. So when I got here, we were 300 people, and we had literally 14 reps in the field, where we should have 40. So now we're 325 people. We should have 62 or 63 reps, and we're in the mid-30s. And so we've really kind of squeezed everybody else in functionally right now and added more salespeople to help get our top line growing, and it's working. So we grew last year, from a previous year of 2% growth, we grew 32% last year. And so if we can do that again this year, that'll drive enough revenue for us to invest in other functions. And so I think this is just all part of that, Richard, and I've appreciated you stepping into the role and doing as good a job as you can possibly do with the resources you have. But we'll get you some resources here as we just get a little bit bigger in size.
Well, I think it's really useful to understand that there is a long-term strategy here, and that there's different stages of evolution, and so I think it's very useful to have that transparency.
And it's part of the situation. The thing I walked into, right? I'm not trying to be critical of the past leadership, but these are the levers that I had to play with when I got here in terms of getting balance and growth in the company. You're not going to get a lot of investment from the world if you're growing at 2%, right? So the first thing we had to do is kind of fix the growth engine, and that's what I've been focused on.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, that did give us a chance to step back and reevaluate how the team's structured, and so the community understands there's been some really positive things out of that reevaluation. For instance, instead of the community team being the core driver of community in the company, we're really trying to work better with other parts of the company to get them more directly engaged. So in IRC, there's been conversations about how do we improve taking contributions and patches, and the engineering team's been very helpful in doing that. We're hoping to make some changes to Jira to make it easier for contributions to be identified by the engineering team, and for community stars, people that have a habit of providing good stuff, to flag their names so engineers can know to look for that stuff first, because it is a prioritization question. And at the same time, marketing and sales, we expect to be more involved with the community going forward.
Well, and I do know that we need to do, by investing in the community, we will get more contribution from the community, and it'll help us in the long run. So this isn't a long-term, not invest in people supporting the community. I think you said it really well, Richard. What we're doing is we're getting a broader set of people throughout the company saying it's important that you spend some time with the community where you haven't been spending time in the past.
Excellent. Absolutely. And it's funny that the same time that you mentioned the importance of investing in community to bring more contributions in, Ol on the IRC channel was saying in exactly the same terms. So
okay, great.
Great minds think alike. So the next question we kind of covered, are there any plans to get more people on the community team? The answer is long-term, yes.
I think midterm is probably a better description.
Good. That's exciting. One of the questions is about the change in title. We used to have a chief community officer. Now I'm head of community. People are wondering, does that portend some big change or not?
You know, I was surprised when I previewed the questions that I saw that. To be very honest, I'm really kind of sticky about titles, and I purposefully have never used the title SVP or EVP. Everybody here is a VP, and so I'm just trying to be real smart about title and title inflation. It's not any recognition of the quality of capability of Richard versus Jeff. I think it's just it is what it is for the time being, and over time as we do get bigger, we'll start to add some chiefs. Because Jeff was already chief community officer when I started with he was already here, right? So it's a title that I inherited, not one that I put in place.
So realignment with the way you like to run your team.
Yeah.
So excellent. So people, and actually this came up in the IRC channel over the last 20 minutes. Alfresco's most of Alfresco's leadership is now in San Mateo. Jeff and I were both U.S. based. I'm still U.S. based, but our most active community contributors are all in Europe. And so the question is, will we be able to have somebody in Europe to be able to drive that?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, maybe the addition to the community team when you add someone to your team should be European based, right? So I'm wide open to those kinds of recommendations. That's a good recommendation.
Absolutely. Excellent. Yeah, I'd love to see that as well. I'm not a morning person, as our European colleagues understand. So another question about supporting local communities. We kind of talked about that. So big question, how do we get more Alfresco swag? Our T-shirt budget has run thin the last 6 months.
Well, we can probably help with that. One of the functional areas that we've really been rebuilding is marketing, and again, we're bringing in some new folks here, and we shouldn't let your swag fall down. So we'll have to get some stuff created for Summit.
And to be really transparent with the community, as we've been changing the way the marketing team works, that makes my specific budget kind of hard to get approvals doing things. But we went through that exercise 2 weeks ago with the marketing leadership, and the pizza fund has been preserved. If you're having a community meetup, I still have a pizza fund. Swag, we have some money to do. It's just I got to sit down and come up with good items. So I don't have any more T-shirt slogans. I need Jeff to pitch in on IRC to help us go with more T-shirt slogans. We'd like to do some stuff for Summit. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
we're still in the figure out phase.
A little T-shirt contest. And we get a winner, and we'll have them print it up and hand it out at Summit. Yep.
So swag's coming on the way, and we're looking for your ideas on what the most coveted items would be. We've already done socks. How do you top socks? So, okay, so let's get into open source. So there's been a lot of concerns in the community, especially a lot of the new leadership have a background outside of open source companies, and sometimes there's a question about how much do they understand the value of open source, how do you measure the value of open source, and would Community Edition go away? Would we close it off and become a proprietary company? what are your thoughts on some of those
Well,
concerns?
again, a really important thing to remember is well, we have a whole bunch of new leadership, and you're right, most of those leaderships has not come out of an open source background. John Newton, David Caruana, Paul Holmes Higgins, Gabrielle, everybody here, there's a core group of people that are all here who helped create this company in the open source model, and it's not changing. There's no intent to move away from what made Alfresco Alfresco. And so, we're trying to do a better job, candidly, of educating the people we do hire on the open source, model and what it's all about. So we've actually even created onboarding content to make people take classes to learn about open source when they come into the company.
Yes, that's been fun to participate in. Full disclosure, I haven't quite got those classes done yet, but we're working on it. And it has been neat. Jeff used to work really closely with you and your team, but now I get to have that role. And in the past 2 months, 3 months, it's been fun to see how much your team has learned about the strategy and the business model. And I don't think, as you understand, we're still figuring out how to measure some of these contributions to be able to put a value on them as we weigh them against other priorities in the company. That's something that I'm hoping to make a bigger priority over the next few months. But it's fun to be able to say, why are we open source, and have your team answer the question in really educated ways.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're absolutely getting there. And again, it's critically important, and it won't change.
And that's why, based on these questions and some of those conversations, that's why we really prioritize that blog post. So for the people in the channel, if you haven't read the blog post we posted, blogs.alfresco.com, that John Newton posted, that we worked on together, you should. It does lay out how we feel about the importance of having an open source product as an alternative to our proprietary products. We hope to show the value of upgrading, but we want to make sure to preserve that core and that choice in the market.
And it's a 2014 blog post versus a 2009. Right?
Yes. In fact, product management, when we were reviewing it, he said, really, we haven't done this. Our goal is to not wait so long to reaffirm these sort of strategies, so you can, so our community can understand our trajectory. And one of the questions was, why do we have to live in fear of how you're going to treat Community Edition? And the answer is, you shouldn't. We apologize. We're going to do better at being transparent and communicating. What sort of ecosystem would you like to see around Community Edition? And what do you think about the efforts of the community to provide governance and support for Community Edition?
Well, again, I'm completely supportive of it, and then we should. I think you'll see us do a better job than we have historically done. With again, Jeff's departure, it's made us kind of, Jeff was the face to the community, and if anything, it created a wall between the community and the organization. He certainly didn't do that on purpose, and he was wonderful at what he did, but with that departure, it's created a much more open conversation internally about, how do we get the community to give contributions that we can actually use, to create products and capabilities adjacent to the platform that we could use. So, I think you'll see us, if anything, get a little bit better than we have been in the past in that regard.
Excellent. And I have briefed the executive team on Order of the Bee, and we think that the whole initiative of the community to self-support and provide some governance is a wonderful thing. We think it's very compatible with our open source commitment, and it's great, and we hope to be able to leverage that and support that effectively. But like Doug said 10 minutes ago, we looked at Red Hat's model of having a separate community-governed product and felt like that would just complicate engineering and complicate the way our company does business. And so we do want to keep Community Edition as a product that's supported by the core engineering team, that we're pushing as a company as an entry to our portfolio to bring new customers into the fold, and encourage the community to participate in ways that they want to. And Order of the Bee is a great way to do that.
Yeah, and again, for complete transparency here, the reason we didn't do that model too is you can see that when we were selling just support on top of the open source product, our company was starting to shrink in terms of its growth. And so we have to find ways to monetize it that help grow the company so that we can keep the core platform open source, but still grow the company in a way that that Alfresco continues to exist.
And so one of the questions asked is, I think it was Peter Lofgren suggested it, a community edition promise that Alfresco would commit to keep any features available in Community Edition today, that it would remain open, that any features available today would remain on par with the Enterprise Edition, and that any new features out of Community Edition would also be governed by the same promise. It's a pretty simple 3-clause statement. Why did we do a whole big blog post instead?
You know, I'm always careful not to overpromise or overcommit. Never say never. Never say always. You know, the world changes. You know, and so I think what we can continue to do versus you know, putting a gun to our heads about we'll never ever, you know, I think it's all about just constant communication about what we will do, you know.
Yeah, when we were looking at that and discussing it, you know, today we have mobile products, today we have cloud products, today we have different types of features in Community Edition that have different levels of appeal. It's really hard, like product management. Thomas said it on the product management team. He said businesses aren't static. They always change, and so we want to make sure that we can respond to that change in a transparent and open way.
Well,
but that core, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, no, it's not only the company is a living organism, the market that we compete in is a living organism, and it changes as well. So you have to be able to, you know, do what you need to do to compete.
Excellent.
But again, the intent, you know, I emphasize this. You know, John built this company with this group of engineers on purpose in the open source model, and he's you know, very deep into that belief, and it will always be that way.
Yeah, I think 10 years of open source track record that embeds itself in the mindset of a company.
Yeah, yeah.
So Thomas wants to point out that when we were talking about community, on our community emphasis and how it gets spread throughout the community, so I now work very closely, well, and Jeff did before, since Thomas took over on the product management team, we work very closely with product management to try and bring feedback from the community into the company and be able to take information from product management and engineering out into the community. And so it's one of those examples where it's not necessarily I have to be the bottleneck all the time, but engineering and product management is now prioritizes community in their regular thinking. So it comes up earlier in discussions about new products, new features, how do we fit into the business model, how do we provide the proper value. It happens much earlier in the conversation now. Also on that topic, engineering wanted me to point out that, you know, look at the 5.0A release. You know, we tested more than we've tested any previous Community Edition release. We've got some great new features around search and reporting. Records management is updated and still in Community Edition. You know, we're definitely providing a lot of value in that open source product. Axel says T-shirts have been done. He already has socks. He needs trousers to complement his swag portfolio. Bindu says he says we've put a huge amount of energy into and engineering into cloud infrastructure, and we've added a lot of features there. It seems apparent that this is a big area of growth at Alfresco. Are there any plans to open source the existing or new cloud capabilities?
So let's define huge. I think there's 7 people currently out of the entire 325 that are working on our SaaS product. I do believe that there is an opportunity to build true SaaS-oriented products in the enterprise content market, but it's more on the application side. And the current thinking is the apps they're built for enterprise and they would not be open sourced. But
so
but just the important message about what will be is we're building the APIs and the SDKs that would allow you to do whatever connection. What we will expose to you is the platform that we're building in the cloud, as we're kind of re-architecting it so that you can, again, contribute in a way that is important to you in addition to the applications that we'll build on top of there. Like the first thing we're coming out with is called a contract management application, it's going to be built to sell into our installed base.
Excellent. So we have our Alfresco in the Cloud product, and the engineering that has gone into that product has gone directly into Community Edition. A lot of the previewer and some of the visual layout items, a lot of the enhancements we've added there are in Alfresco 5.0. The work we've done around making that run on AWS and some of that infrastructure, we're releasing parts of that, and parts of it is very specific to our system. And then we have our other cloud initiative, which nobody's been able to play with yet because it's still in closed beta, which is to do this contract management application. And I think when I was talking with John Newton and Thomas about that, the idea is that's more like a Netflix or a Google sort of engineering project where we're using lots of open source components and we're contributing lots of open source components, but that top layer of application we're going to keep in-house. Is that a fair way to characterize that, Doug?
Yes, absolutely.
Axel says he didn't think his suggestion for trousers would make it into the session, but it's a good suggestion. I was trying to mentally picture how we'd incorporate the logo into a pair of pants. We'll have to see how that works. Maybe running. Running warmers. Okay, so talked about Community Edition quite a bit. It seems all the engineers we talk to support an open source strategy. They live and breathe open source. However, when we're hearing from sales and management, I get the feeling that open source is just the thing that looks good on paper, but they really don't care. They don't want to talk with the community. They don't understand open source. How are we going to solve that? And you talked about us doing employee training. That's something we really need to work on as the company grows.
Yeah. Hopefully we've answered the question throughout the conversation today.
Yeah. What is up with the email gate where you have to offer an email address for downloading Community Edition? The answer to that is there was some confusion about the Enterprise trial and the Community Edition trial, the Community Edition downloads, and it's all going to be fixed in 2 or 3 weeks. So I think that's the answer there. Okay, so that was the list of questions. Yeah, we're going pretty close on time. So, wow, there's a lot of IRC chat. I didn't keep up. One of the questions is, would CMIS ever be enterprise only? Can we guarantee it's going to be supported? So CMIS is the, for new people in the chat, CMIS is the industry standard API for interacting with content management systems. We are open source, open standards. That is that's table stakes for a Community Edition release.
Correct.
Yeah, and I think we'll find that
it's a standard. I mean, of course, source that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think I got the word table stakes from you when we were having a conversation about where do we draw the line. It's like a lot of these innovative features we want to make standard for having a robust content management repository. So we need to get them into Community Edition.
Trust me, I'm a big believer that community has helped drive the growth of the company. It lets people, if you look at the number of enterprises that have downloaded the Community Edition that ultimately become customers, it's huge. And so, I'm a huge believer in it.
Yeah. Excellent. So Ginger Ninja says, has Alfresco figured out the community yet? And I think the answer is no one's figured out the community yet, but we're sure trying.
There's a lot of effort here, right? We're trying to do a better job. Hopefully, you'll feel that in the coming months.
So there was a conversation about how do we get better at taking contributions. I'm going to kind of table a lot of that for a future conversation. Engineering, Brian Remington, our head of engineering, he volunteered to provide a Tech Talk Live or an Office Hours, depending on how we want to do it, on how to prepare a contribution that the engineering team will be excited to accept. And we're still figuring out on our internal process for that, but I hope that we have that conversation after Summit.
Great.
Yeah, so they were talking about whether where we draw the line and what counts as core versus non-core, and that's a hard question. I think we have to take it on a case-by-case basis.
We
But
do.
how do you think what's your philosophy around driving what sort of things would be the right innovation for Community Edition?
I really think it comes down to what are those features and functions that are needed in an enterprise that would be used in an enterprise that wouldn't be needed in a community edition, right? What are the things that our large enterprise customers are asking us for that would be unique to enterprises? Just what's going to drive the decision on that? Now, when the core platform, I think most things will end up being, put out into the community edition. It's things that might reside on top of that platform that we are making decisions around in terms of, is it open source or is it community edition or not community edition?
Excellent. Thanks for that guidance. So there's a request for towels with the Alfresco logo instead of pants. That's especially for Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans who think towels are very important to life. That's a decent idea. There's a request to relocate me to Europe. I think that's a great idea.
Oh, really? Okay.
Though every time I've looked at buying a house that would hold my large family in Europe, I think, wow, I don't know if that'd work. Somebody asked if how would Alfresco respond to a fork that was introducing community features that are different than or better than Alfresco Enterprise? And I think that's an interesting question because we went through that with Activity. We had an Activity partner who we worked with very closely, and they decided to fork so they could pursue their own roadmap. And that's just part of being an open source company. I think that you let people do what they want to do, and you just innovate as best you can.
Yeah, but again, I hope in the light of what we're trying to accomplish, we don't help the stand-up companies that compete with Alfresco's platform, right? I mean, let's stay as a family and move forward. Versus that to me, that feels like a divorce,
Yes, the T-shirt today. I play well with others,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think the conversation we had internally around the efforts of Order to Be was really positive because we looked and said, hey, these people have identified areas that we're not investing enough, and they've offered to help. And how do we do that collaboratively? It's not a threat. It's a conversation. It's a collaboration. So Gab says that he thinks that we've done a really good job at making Community Edition, Enterprise Edition closer in quality and in the core feature set. He says there were some structural limitations in the build and release process that made it hard to take contributions and made it hard to do a lot of the testing we want to do. But with the Maven implementation in 5 and with Samuel, our really professional release manager, managing things, I think I agree with Gab that we've gotten in a much better position to manage the two products, to keep them both high quality, and to take contributions from the community. I had a question for you, Doug. So other companies struggle with the same idea of having products with different price points, and how do you keep one from not cannibalizing the other? How do we manage that as a management team to say, look, we want people to use Community Edition, but at the same time we want to drive sales growth in our subscription model? How do we manage both of those competing interests?
Well, I think if anything, one of the things that I think most of the community members know is we actually increased the price of the product to create even a bigger differentiation between community and the price point in which you start to become a Alfresco customer. Because we think those enterprise capabilities that we spent 10 years building now are worth more than they were previously, price pointed it in the marketplace. So it's a balance. We'll continue to try to find it, but for now we actually doubled the price almost of our products that go into enterprises.
Yeah, and that was one of the questions that just came up. Is his changing the price hurt the community perception? And I think just the opposite. It underscores the value of having that core product that people can use, and the people who are getting value fit into the price tier that we've laid out.
That's it.
Ole says that he can find me a nice place to live in Denmark, so I'll have to go check that out sometime. the Jeff says that that having an antagonistic relationship with a community governance organization would feel like a divorce. He says that this feels like a community date night. So that's
That's funny.
always glad to have Jeff's wit around. There's a lot of conversation about desktop sync and about whether that makes sense as an enterprise edition product or whether that really is part of table stakes for a modern content management system. And of course, that's complicated by the fact that we've struggled to get some of the desktop sync
Out.
the technology ready.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any thoughts on how desktop sync fits into
I think we have to further. Let's get it to the point where we can actually get it released. We've really struggled with it, and so I haven't had a conversation with anybody about is that open source or not open source. So
that's a fair answer.
Yeah.
So we'll have to bring Thomas from the product management team in to answer that question for us at some point. So Ol asks, in the future, if you have an important question, an important conversation you want to have with somebody from an Alfresco, but you're not an enterprise customer or looking to buy, how would that phone call go? Because in the past, all we got was a price for the enterprise subscription. You know, that's a question of training. We do have a sales team now that's more dedicated to handling those requests, and I've been working closely with them. I've trained the U.S. team, but I haven't trained the European team yet on how to be helpful with that. Unfortunately, well, it depends on what you consider fortunate or not. You know, we don't have bandwidth to handle every question, but we do say we want to make sure people don't just get a price and a subscription and get dumped. We want to move them into the forums where they can work with the rest of the community. And the nice thing about the forums is that that's where our engineering team hangs out. We have tons of engineers in the forums, thank goodness. And so if you want to have that sort of conversation, of course, you can always email community@alfresco.com. Me and a couple other people in the company get that. You can always go to the forums and interact. You can come to office hours. We want to make sure people have avenues for that. But I do admit it can be a challenge. If you call up a salesperson who's worried about this month's quota, it can be hard to get a lot of
they're working. I call it they're working to pay their mortgages. You know, keep their families going. Right. Exactly. A lot of their income is tied to commissions. Right. So you can understand that internal struggle that they would have for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think we've structured our sales team in a way that you know, especially a lot of our SDR reps, that's how we refer to them internally, you know, they're really helpful people. And as I've had the conversation, they just need to know you know, where do I send people? And the instructions I gave them is send them to the forum so we can work with them.
Yeah.
Luis says that we do like to handle non-sales and non-system integrator conversations with the business development team. So he and Jerome can help me out on having a lot of those conversations too. Every organization struggles with finding the right person to handle each request, and so you know, we have that struggle too. But we do want to make sure we do as best we can. Mars Bard asks, why can't we buy support for Community Edition? And that's a good question, and it's a hard question. We do see other open source companies offer support for their Community Edition products. How does that fit in the larger business model? I know part of it is historical. We don't want to make a huge change just because it sounds good. We want to actually be able to measure it. What do you think are
I've never gotten the question before, to be honest. Okay. We'd have to, you know, think about that, right? I mean, I'd have to investigate that. I mean, giving support for something that we get no revenue for is completely just expense then with nothing to support on the other side. So I can see why the company probably made a decision not to have a support organization just for the Community Edition, right? But I've never...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think historically, Community Edition and Enterprise Edition were very close together, and so the key differentiator was support. I think as we've improved or increased the differentiation between the products, a MongoDB model where people can pay for support on Community Edition could make sense, but again, that's a major change to the way the company works. I don't think you make a decision like that quickly.
Yep, just being transparent there.
Yeah. So very useful. Useful questions. Let's see. Time check. Don't want to. I know you've got a full day of meetings. Business development team. Why can't? So Ginger asked a question specifically about desktop sync, but why don't we sell add-ons around Community Edition to try and make some of that money on a Community Edition install instead of making people move to Enterprise Edition? I think that goes back to, that's a very similar question to why we don't offer support on Community Edition. Tweaking major components of a business model need to be done very cautiously.
Right.
But do you have an opinion about?
No, I think you said it very well. I mean, there's all kinds of things in terms of test and the amount of effort goes into doing that would be significant.
Yeah. So, and we have had that conversation around the cloud and the hybrid sync. We haven't had that conversation specifically around desktop sync, but there's a complication to having lots of little things being sold around Community Edition versus just saying, hey, join our enterprise community or join our enterprise customer subscriber base. So, yeah.
Probably make the last question here, Richard, just because
yes.
I have a hard stop. Okay. No, not
yes.
trying to be rude, but I got it.
No, that's fine. Thanks for the time check because we have 3 minutes. So somebody asks, I think we've actually covered all the questions. There's been a lot of conversation, but it looks like most of it is conversation.
Well, let me just end with this. I mean, I appreciate you inviting me to this. I'm sorry I've taken so long to even, I should have forced myself into this conversation long ago. But I think what you'll see from us is we really will have more folks in Alfresco participating in communicating with you in kind of this regard. So we should get Brian Remington on here. You should meet Thomas DeMeo, who has come in to run product management for us, comes from Adobe Citrix background, and has got real strength around UX and UI. So we got to get you to know the team a little bit here, and we're wide open to doing that. So look for us just to be more communicative with you than we have in the past.
Excellent.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us, Doug. I know you're very busy, and I really respect you making the time to do this. I appreciate the community and the great questions, both in advance and live, and want to encourage everybody to check out summit.alfresco.com. If we don't see you live, we hope to see you virtually. Maybe you can see some of the recordings, or of course, keep hanging out on the IRC channel. And next Tech Talk Live is going to be in November, so apologize for the 2 months of focusing on Summit, but it's going to be a great event. It'll produce a lot of videos for you. So,
thanks, everybody.
Thank you.